The wheelchair glowed under the Hollywood Bowl stage lights, reflecting the chrome psychedelic light show as 15,000 fans roared for the Doors to begin. The Purple Heart medal on his chest caught the spotlights, and the oxygen tank hissed quietly behind the wheelchair. The 22-year-old face was tired and pale, but the eyes were alive, burning to live one last time. Jim Morrison took the stage, leather pants clinging to his body, chest bare, and the end began with Ray Manzarek's Vox Continental organ's spine-chilling intro. Morrison grabbed the microphone, closed his eyes, and let out that deep, dark baritone. "This is the end, beautiful friend." But at the 47th second, Morrison's eyes opened. He looked behind the spotlights at the edge of the stage and saw something in the front row. Tears were streaming down the face of the young man in the wheelchair. Morrison's hand instinctively shot up. The band stopped, and 15,000 people held their breath because this had never happened at a Doors concert. Morrison had never stopped the music. Never. If you want to discover the rest of this story and the unknown side of Jim Morrison, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Morrison dropped the microphone, and 15,000 people froze as the feedback noise echoed throughout the amphitheater. Ray Manzarek lifted his fingers from the keyboard and looked at Jim, unsure what to do. John Densmore held his drumsticks in the air. Robbie Krieger gripped his guitar tightly, but didn't touch the strings. The crowd that had been screaming and cheering just a second ago, was suddenly completely silent. Morrison began to walk off the stage. His leather pants creaked on the metal stairs at the edge of the stage. His feet touched California soil, and he began walking among the audience. People made way for him, but no one tried to touch him. The expression on Morrison's face, that intensity, that focus, said it would be wrong to touch him. This was not a performance. This was something else. When Morrison reached the front row, he stopped in front of the wheelchair and looked down. The young sailor looked up, tears still streaming down his cheeks, the Purple Heart medal gleaming on his chest. The two men looked at each other, and in that moment, 15,000 people disappeared. Only the two of them remained. Then Jim Morrison knelt down. The dirt stuck to his leather pants, but Morrison didn't care. Next to the wheelchair, in front of 15,000 people, he knelt and took the young man's hand. Then he began to speak. Quietly. So quietly that even people just a few meters away couldn't hear his words clearly. But Morrison was talking, and the young sailor was listening, and the tears in his eyes wouldn't stop. But the expression on his face was changing, from pain to relief, perhaps to understanding, perhaps just to the feeling of being seen. The 15,000 spectators at the Hollywood Bowl stood completely still. No one spoke. No one moved. A minute passed. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Morrison was still speaking, still holding that young man's hand, and the crowd was still waiting. 4 minutes. 5 minutes. People nearby could hear the tone of Morrison's voice, soft, soothing, deep. But the words were fading. A woman would say she heard the word brother. A man would claim to have heard the word jungle. But no one was sure. 6 minutes. Some in the crowd began to cry, silently. Tears ran down cheeks, but there was no sound. Because this moment was bigger than them. It was about Vietnam. It was about soldiers who couldn't come home. It was about the wound in America's heart. 7 minutes. Morrison stopped. He touched the young man's shoulder lightly. A gesture, a farewell, a sacred moment, and stood up. Morrison walked back on stage, and the crowd was still silent. No one applauded. No one shouted. They just watched. When Morrison came on stage, he picked up the microphone from the floor, his eyes still moist, and turned to the band members. Then he approached the microphone and spoke. His voice trembled, but was determined. "I dedicate this night," he said, "this entire night, to every soul we lost in that damn forest." The silence shattered, but not with applause, with sobs. Grown men began to cry at the Hollywood Bowl. Women covered their faces with their hands. The young people silently shed tears. When Morrison started the end again, his voice was different, slower, heavier. Every word carried weight. "This is the end. My only friend. The end." And 15,000 people felt every word, carried every note in their hearts, because now it was no longer just a song. It had become a prayer. The concert continued, but no one was really listening to the music. "Light My Fire" played, and people tried to dance, but their thoughts were still on those 7 minutes. "When the Music's Over" played, and Morrison's voice was strong, but there was a distance in his eyes. When the concert ended, Morrison quietly left the stage and disappeared into the wings. The band members looked at each other. Ray Manzarek finally broke the silence. "Everything changed tonight." John Densmore nodded. Robbie Krieger put his guitar in its case and said, "I've never seen Jim like that." And they were right, because something had changed that night, not just for Morrison, but for everyone there. No one noticed when the wheelchair in the front row emptied. The young sailor and his sister Carol left quietly. But Carol saw something, her brother's face. For the first time in 6 months, Tommy was smiling. He was really smiling. "What did he say?" Carol asked. Tommy turned to Carol in his wheelchair, and there was a sparkle in his eyes, a sparkle that had been missing for the last 6 months. "He said he understood," Tommy replied. "He said he really understood." Carol asked no more questions, because the look on her brother's face said it all. Whatever Morrison had said to him, whatever had happened in those 7 minutes, something had changed for Tommy. Peace. Maybe that was the word. Peace. 3 weeks later, Tommy died. August 12, 1968, San Diego VA Hospital, 6:42 a.m. Carol was there, holding his hand, and Tommy's final hours were difficult. Pain, morphine, confusion. But a few hours before he died, there was a moment of clarity. Tommy opened his eyes and looked at Carol. "Jim Morrison," he said. Carol leaned in. "What did he say?" Carol asked, finally asking the question she had wondered about for 3 weeks. Tommy smiled weakly. "He said I was forgiven," he said. His voice was weak, but his words were clear. "No matter what happened in Da Nang, no matter what I did, he said I was forgiven." And when he said that, Carol, I believed him. Those were Tommy's last complete words. An hour later, he slipped away. 2 hours later, he was dead. Carol hadn't cried for 3 weeks, but now she cried, because even though her brother was gone, his last 3 weeks had been different. Jim Morrison had given her something. Just 7 minutes. But in those 7 minutes, peace. And that was everything. Carol didn't tell this story to anyone for 10 years. Journalists called. Doors fans asked questions. But Carol remained silent because the story felt sacred. But in 1978, a Rolling Stone journalist found Carol and wanted to interview her about the Hollywood Bowl night. Carol thought, maybe people need to know. Maybe they needed to know that Jim Morrison wasn't just the Lizard King, not just the Miami scandal and the death in Paris, but also those 7 minutes. Carol told the story. And when the article was published, Jim Morrison's forgotten moment, 7 minutes at the Hollywood Bowl, Doors fans were shocked, because they had never heard this story. A moment when 15,000 people were there, but no one ever talked about it. The article went viral. People started remembering what happened that night. Letters started coming in. I was there too. I saw it too. It changed my life. And Carol realized she had made the right decision. When Ray Manzarek read the article, he reached out to Carol. "Carol," he said on the phone. Jim was different that night. I always knew it, but I didn't understand why. Now I do. Ray told Carol how Morrison changed after that night. Quieter, more thoughtful, less aggressive on stage. Something had broken in Jim, Ray said, but it had broken in a good way. It was as if he had finally understood something. What had he understood? Ray wasn't sure, but Carol knew. Morrison had understood that beyond fame and celebrity, he could touch another human being simply as a human being. Music was important. Art was important. But sometimes the most important thing was just being there. It was just listening. It was just saying to someone, I see you. I see your pain, and you're not alone. Morrison died in Paris on July 3, 1971. He was found in the bathtub, no autopsy was performed, and the cause of death was recorded as heart failure. He was 27 years old, like Jimi Hendrix, like Janis Joplin, like Brian Jones, the 27 Club, the Cursed Club. But Morrison's legacy wasn't just his death in Paris. It wasn't just the Miami scandal. It wasn't just Light My Fire and Riders on the Storm. His legacy was also those 7 minutes at the Hollywood Bowl, the soldier in the wheelchair, the kneeling, the whispered words, and 15,000 witnesses. Today, the Hollywood Bowl still stands. Concerts are held there every summer. But Doors fans know July 21st, 1968 was a special night. Perhaps not a turning point in rock history, but certainly a moment in human history. Jim Morrison showed the world something that night. You can be famous, you can be a rock god, but you're still human. And sometimes, the most important thing isn't the music. Sometimes the most important thing is just to hold a hand, touch a shoulder, and tell a stranger, you matter, your pain is real, and you're not alone. 7 minutes, 15,000 witnesses, a life changed, and 50 years later, the story is still being told. Carol Hendricks died in 2015 at the age of 82, but before she died, she gave one final interview. I think about Tommy every day, she said, and every day I thank Jim Morrison, because those 7 minutes brought peace to my brother's final days. And that brought us peace. Morrison gave us a gift, and I will never forget that gift. The journalist asked, if you could ask Morrison for anything, what would you ask for? Carol smiled. I would just want to thank him, face to face, and I would want to tell him, Jim, what you did that night, those 7 minutes, was more important than all your music, because you touched a person's soul, and that lasts forever.